the 26th of June is International Day Against Drug Abuse and Illicit Trafficking. UN Secretary General António Guterres says, and I quote, "Drug trafficking is tearing through communities with substances that are more potent, more dangerous and more deadlier than ever." Meanwhile, criminal networks prey on the most vulnerable, particularly women and youth, as they rake in hundreds of billions annually through the illicit drug trade. And here at home, the World Changes candidate will have a National Day of Prayer. Let's speak to Pastor Kabelo Mabalane, who will lead that prayer and who's joining us in studio. A very good evening to you, Muruti. Thank you so much for your time.
Only a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Let's start with, days like tomorrow. We often hear of a day, marking this and that, and sometimes people trivialize those days. And a day like tomorrow speaks of where we find ourselves as not only South Africa, but the world.
Look, I mean, I understand why a day like tomorrow can be trivialized. The stats that you just shared now about the illicit drug trade and many people getting very rich. Unfortunately, our criminal justice system also turning a blind eye. Even in talking about our criminal justice system, I remember when I was very actively involved early on in my drug recovery, obviously having the energy and wanting to help, my brothers and sisters to come out of active addiction. We'd go into communities. We'd, speak to various people who'd be struggling with, with drug addiction. And the guys, wanted the help. We offered help. We plugged some in various, drug rehabilitation centers. But the saddest truth was the drug dealers would be staying in the very same street as these guys and girls who needed help. And unfortunately, because of our socio-economic, landscape in our country, the drug dealer has a nice house, potentially pays school fees and buys food for the people mostrating, and it becomes very difficult for the community to out the person, And one of the very few things that also kind of dimmed my vigor in terms of really going into the community, because I realized what a futile exercise it was, right? So ever since then, I've committed myself to assisting, people struggling in active abuse, when they come to church. Because, when somebody comes to church, and I share my testimony time and time again, moms and dads, uncles, families will always kind of push these boys and girls to me. And I found that the church is a great vehicle and conduit for me to use to help these people, because it's such a ginormous task, at hand. But me showing up tomorrow at the Leondale Sports Grounds to commemorate this day is me also just, one of the tenets of recovery is service. And me being there tomorrow, leading this prayer, encouraging the community, is me continuing to serve and me not forgetting where I come from. And I'm also trusting God that in sharing my testimony tomorrow, in leading the prayer, I'm going to encourage the community. Maybe there'll be a few people who are ready to take that next step, and I'll be there to facilitate that. And
you speak about a very concerning description of what some of, the addicts are facing every day. It extends to families, because if your family wants to help you and you are now faced with this task of living just near this drug dealer, and at the same time you're not able to get help, it speaks of the sense of hopelessness for families and an easier way to relapse, I suppose.
And again, showing up tomorrow, because I know what got me on the other side. I celebrate 22 years of sobriety this year. And me getting to the other side is my mom, Brahuma Sikela, many friends, and family, never stopping to intervene and speak into the situation. So as hopeless as it may seem in our communities, one of my messages is always to never stop intervening, never stop holding the drug addict to a higher standard, keep them accountable. tell them, about, the devastation that is going to be their life if they carry on. And it might feel as if, we're lighting a candle in the sun. But if someone stopped and dared not to speak up, I would not be sitting here in front of you this evening. So tomorrow is keeping hope alive, as it were,
And it's quite important, especially because one thinks about the fact that there are conversations we have about drug addiction, particularly when you would go to an area where you grew up, you see somebody you worry about where they are. But I wonder, what are the conversations are we not having about the problem of drugs in South Africa? Where are we missing it?
Look, in my experience in the 22 years is really just connecting the why somebody is using. I think we always deal with the fruit and the manifestation of the problem, the actual using. And not only limited to drugs, because in there I want to include drugs, alcohol, sex, food. All of these things are outside things that help us deal with ourselves internally. I've seen it, it can be in Soweto or be in Sandton. There's a common denominator. What we're not getting to and forcing the addict to speak about is the trauma that they've encountered. Because drug addiction is just self-medication. It's just somebody using something from the outside to heal what is happening on the inside. So we focus only on stopping the outside when we actually don't focus on what's happening on the inside. And sadly, being in a rehab in the northern suburbs of Johannesburg, where English is a medium of instruction, and we're very familiar with concepts like abuse and trauma and all of these things. But I've seen it with people who, come to the center and not familiar with these concepts. And now when you're not familiar with the concept, how can you then get help? So it's about, coming up with literature. I know some people have been hard at work in translating Narcotics Anonymous and Alcoholic Anonymous literature into African languages, and that's a start. Because to heal, you need to understand the concept and what you are dealing with.
So just before I let you go, then let's speak about tomorrow.
Yes.
You will be part of this prayer. Obviously, it is aimed at least somebody who's feeling hopeless, to see that there's hope.
Yes.
Let's speak about what else is expected and how people can join.
Tomorrow, the faith-based organizations in Leondale are going to be the predominant presence tomorrow, right? And obviously the rest of the community. And my message tomorrow to the faith-based organizations is really to double down on the gospel of Jesus Christ. Right, because the gospel of Jesus Christ is a scandalous, understandable grace, right? And I want to encourage the church to preach the gospel, because the gospel is about acceptance, right? But in accepting you, the acceptance is to encourage you to build yourself up. Because I think what we're doing is we're giving these young men and women, we're focusing on their morality, and them fulfilling certain checks and balances before they come to us. And I'm saying, no. We need to accept them as they are, because I'm here today because the church accepted me as I am. And in accepting me as I am, they were able to get through to me. So my message tomorrow is really to share the gospel of Jesus Christ, to speak to, we should all have signs on top of our churches that say no perfect people allowed.
That's true.
And I think when we lead with that, many of these young men and women will come through our doors and we'll be able to minister to them.
Thank you so much, Pastor, for stopping by.
Yes.
And, one life makes a difference to many. Thank you so much for talking to us this evening. That was Pastor Kabelo Mabalane. They're joining us ahead of tomorrow. Remember, it is a very important day marking, the world commemorating, especially a very important day. Drug abuse in our society is a huge one. It's something we need to talk about, face it head on.